Imagine a routine flight turning into a moment of tragedy that shakes an entire nation. Today on Real-Time Affairs, we unravel the mysterious events behind the Air India Flight 171 crash, a story of sudden silence, critical decisions, and a search for answers that everyone deserves to hear.
Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine a scene, maybe one you've even experienced. That feeling of settling into your seat on a big jet, the anticipation for an international flight. You hear that deep rumble, the engine's starting up, it's almost comforting, Then the pushback in your seat as the plane speeds down the runway, faster, faster. And then lift off, that feeling of soaring, the ground falling away, it's expectation, right? But for Air India Flight 171 on June 12, 2025, that moment, well, it lasted just seconds. This modern marvel, a Boeing Dreamliner built for these long journeys, suddenly struggled. It faltered, and then it just fell. Not minutes later, just 32 seconds. 32 seconds after leaving the ground, it crashed into a densely populated area. Multiple explosions, human cost, just catastrophic. Nearly everyone on board, and many people on the ground too. It's a chilling story. A routine flight turned into, well, an unimaginable tragedy in moments.
And our goal here at the Deep Dive, as always, is to try and help you understand the really complex layers of information around something like Air India Flight 171. We're going to take a deep dive into the evidence that's been meticulously gathered so far, the preliminary findings, the different theories swirling around, and of course, the profound impact of this incredibly rare and devastating incident. We're pulling together insights from the detailed reports from India's Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau, the AAIB, but also perspectives from aviation experts, global news coverage. We want to foster some critical thinking about aviation safety, yes, but also that complex, sometimes really challenging interaction between human decisions and increasingly automated machines.
So Air India Flight 171 started just like any other scheduled international flight. Ahmedabad, India, heading to London Gatwick in the UK. A long haul, usually pretty uneventful, just connecting continents. And the aircraft itself, it was an 11-year-old Boeing 787-8 Dreamliner. Registration VTANB. Now, the 787 Dreamliner, for those maybe not familiar, it's a modern, twin-engine, wide-body jet. Lots of composite materials, known for being fuel efficient, good for long ranges. This specific one delivered to Air India back in January 2014. By the time of the crash, it had flown quite a bit, over 41,868 flight hours. So it's definitely an active plane.
And by all accounts, certainly on paper, the aircraft seemed ready to go. Its takeoff weight, 213,401 kilos, and the fuel load, 54,200 kilos, were checked and confirmed well within the allowed limits for the flight plan. Before departure, no major technical problems were reported. It's worth noting, though, there were 5 active minimum equipment list items, MEL items. Now, these are minor, permissible issues. They don't ground the plane, but they do need fixing within a set time. It shows, ongoing maintenance, but not an immediate safety red flag. The crew, too, seemed experienced. Captain Sumit Sabarwal, 56 years old, he had about 15,600 flight hours total. A big chunk of that, 8,600 hours, was on the 787. He was the pilot monitoring for this flight. And alongside him, First Officer Clive Kunder, 32 years old, around 3,400 total hours, with 1,100 of those on the 787. He was the pilot flying. Both pilots did their pre-flight breathalyzer tests about an hour and 40 minutes before takeoff. Cleared, fit to fly. So yeah, paints that picture you mentioned. Busy airport, modern plane, experienced crew, cleared for departure. Everything looked, well, by the book.
But what happened next was just anything but routine. Let's try and piece together those critical, horrifying moments of the takeoff itself. Okay, so 08.07.37 UTC. The 7 SAM starts its takeoff roll. Runway 23 at Ahmedabad. Conditions were actually pretty good. Light winds, visibility 6 kilometers, no significant clouds. Pretty standard. And the plane, like often happens with a heavy long-haul flight, used pretty much the whole 3.5-kilometer runway to get up to speed. Liftoff was at 808.08.39 UTC. Just over a minute into the roll, it quickly reached a max indicated airspeed of 180 knots just 3 seconds later at 08.08.42 UTC. But here's the crucial, really chilling detail from the flight data recorder. The aircraft only climbed to a peak altitude of 608.5 VLM, and then its signal was lost. Just 8 seconds after hitting that peak airspeed, 08.08.50 UTC. Gone.
Yeah, that altitude, just over 600 feet, that's a critical data point. For a Boeing 787, these things are designed to climb fast, get up to cruising altitude efficiently for long flights. 600 feet is extraordinarily low. It signals immediately that something went catastrophically wrong almost the instant it left the ground. Modern jets like the Dreamliner, they have incredible power, multiple layers of backup systems, redundancy. To only reach that minimal height before the event suggests a really unusual and immediate problem. A problem that just wiped out any margin for error, any chance for recovery. In aviation, altitude is time, right? and they just didn't have any.
And this is exactly where the story shifts. It moves from maybe a mechanical failure investigation towards something deeply unsettling, a human mystery. The preliminary report from the AIIB in India, it revealed something shocking, almost unprecedented, really. At 8.08.42 UTC, remember, that's precisely when it hit maximum airspeed. Just seconds after liftoff, something happened, something inexplicable. Both the Engine 1 and Engine 2 fuel control switches moved. They went from the RUN position to CUF, and they were moved 1 second apart. Think about that. A deliberate physical action. Twice. In the most critical seconds of the flight.
The immediate result, well, you can imagine, devastating. Fuel supply to both engines cut off instantly. Engine power levels, what we call N1 and N2, those are the speeds of the main fan and the core engine sections, basically indicating for us they just plummeted, dropped dramatically from their takeoff settings. And the cockpit voice recorder, the CVR, captured this chilling exchange. It's fragmented, but it gives this deeply troubling glimpse into the confusion, maybe even denial, of that moment. One pilot is heard asking the other, "Why did you cut off?" And the other pilot replies, starkly, almost in disbelief, "I didn't."
Wow, I didn't. That dialogue just blows open a whole new set of questions, doesn't it? That immediate confusion, the denial right there in the cockpit, it forces you to consider, well, maybe not a mechanical cause, or at least some incredibly bizarre sequence that even the pilots couldn't grasp in real time. And the preliminary report is kind of vague there, isn't it? That's been a point people have raised. It doesn't say which pilot said what. But the dialogue itself, happening just as the engines are dying, it points to something internal. An action one pilot was maybe unaware of or unwilling to admit to in that split second. It's chilling because it suggests something was deeply wrong inside the cockpit.
And just 5 seconds after that fuel cutoff, at 08.08.47 UTC, the ram air turbine, the RAT, automatically deployed. Now, for listeners, the RAT is basically a small emergency propeller. It drops out from the plane's belly, the airflow spins it, and it generates emergency hydraulic and electric power for critical flight controls when the main engines are gone. Seeing it deploy in Flight 171 so early, literally seconds after the engine started winding down, it's stark proof. Undeniable evidence that all power from the main engines was lost. It's a last-ditch safety system, and its activation just confirms how dire the situation was instantly.
But even then, despite how baffling and dire it was, the crew tried to get the power back. Almost immediately. It shows, the training for dual engine failure kicking in, even if the cause made no sense. At 08.08.52 UTC, that's 9 seconds after the first switch moved to cut off the fuel control switch for Engine 1 was moved back. From sec-off to run-in. Then, 4 seconds later, 8.08.56 UTC, Engine 2 switch followed, 12 seconds after its cutoff. The FADE system, that's the full authority digital engine control, the engine computer, it automatically tried to restart the engines. The report says Engine 1 had relit, it was spooling up, showing signs it might recover. But Engine 2, it had also relit, but its core speed kept falling. FADC was struggling to get thrust back and stabilize it.
Yes, and what's fascinating here, and frankly deeply concerning for the investigators, is that delay. Moving the switches back to run. The Boeing 787 emergency checklist, the flight crew operations manual for a dual engine failure. It includes moving the fuel switches to sit off, then immediately back to run. It's a memory item. And a memory item means it should be instant, reflexive, drilled into pilots, the 9 to 12 second delay we see here. That deviates significantly from that expected rapid response. It forces you to ask, what was happening in those crucial seconds? Was it shock, utter confusion, something else? Whatever it was, it stopped them from performing that immediate critical checklist action. It wasn't a standard emergency response.
Right. That delay, combined with that initial, "Why did you cut off? I didn't" exchange, it just suggests this level of disorientation, maybe, or an event so far outside the norm that it just short-circuited the standard procedure. You train for emergencies and simulators, but maybe not for something this bizarre, this specific. It points towards a breakdown maybe in that immediate coordinated crew action that's so vital when you're that low, with absolutely no margin for error.
And the final moments. They happen incredibly fast. At 08.09.05 UTC, one of the pilots sends out that desperate call, "Mayday, Mayday, Mayday," the universal signal of imminent danger. Air traffic control responded, asking for the call sign. But there was no reply. That was it, the last transmission. CCTV footage from the airport, it captures this harrowing sight. The aircraft, somehow still wings level, nose slightly up, but just falling, losing altitude rapidly before it even cleared the airport boundary wall. It crashed about 32 seconds after liftoff, just 1.5 kilometers, less than a mile from the runway. And the impact zone, the hostile block of BJ Medical College.
Yep.
Multiple explosions, thick black smoke, visible for miles, just awful.
That speed.
Liftoff to impact in less than a minute. It's staggering, truly staggering. It's just such a stark reminder of how unforgiving aviation can be, especially when something critical goes wrong right after takeoff. No altitude, no time. Just underscores the razor-thin margins and the need for everything to work perfectly in those first few seconds. There was just no time to figure it out, no altitude to trade for speed, just an immediate plunge.
Exactly. The whole sequence, from that RET deploying, confirming the loss of thrust, to the final impact, barely 30 seconds. It just highlights how absolutely critical every single action, every decision is during takeoff. With no height, no time to diagnose a double engine failure, the crew is in an almost impossible situation, really, regardless of what caused it. And that immediacy is why those pre-impact actions, those switch movements, are the absolute focus.
Which brings us right back to that astonishing discovery, the real heart of the investigation. The mystery of those fuel switches. The main finding from the AAIB's preliminary report, as we said, is that deliberate physical movement. Both engine fuel control switches are in to cut off, and this is just incredibly rare, highly unusual for dual engine failure. Normally, if both engines quit, you're looking at external factors, right? Like massive bird strikes hitting both engines, severe fuel contamination affecting the whole system, or maybe some really weird simultaneous mechanical issue.
Yes, and what's so perplexing and really important to understand is the design of these specific switches. They aren't just simple toggles you can accidentally narc. They are robustly built. They have guards, brackets on either side, specifically to prevent you bumping them by mistake. And crucially, they have this metal stop-lock mechanism. To move a switch from run to cutoff, you have to consciously, physically lift the switch lever up, pass that stop, and then move it down to key off. It's a deliberate two-step action for each switch. Moving one is something you just don't do in normal flight. It's for shutting down at the gate or specific rare emergencies where you intend to shut an engine down. So the possibility of both being moved accidentally, one after the other like that, experts have called it almost non-existent, highly unlikely. The design itself implies intent. That positive physical action required, it makes an accident seem extremely improbable and really forces you to ask why. Why would this happen?
Okay, so if it probably wasn't an accident and the investigation seems to be ruling out the usual suspects, what does that leave? The AIB, they've been systematically checking things off the list, and the preliminary report is pretty clear on what they haven't found. So far, no sign of any mechanical or design flaw with the Boeing 787 itself or the GE engines. And importantly, neither Boeing nor GE Aerospace have issued any urgent warnings to airlines. No multi-operator messages, no all-ops wires. That's usually a sign they don't suspect a widespread mechanical defect. Same goes for the regulators, India's AAIB and the US FAA. No urgent safety recommendations pointing to a mechanical fault. That silence is pretty significant, isn't it?
It is. It strongly suggests that, at least based on the initial data, a systemic mechanical failure isn't the prime suspect. This process of elimination, driven by that hard data from the recorders, it's absolutely crucial. It narrows the focus dramatically. They've also confirmed no evidence of fuel contamination. Samples from the fuel trucks, the airport tanks, all tested satisfactory. Also ruled out improper flap settings. The recorder showed flaps were correctly set at 5 degrees for takeoff, standard procedure. And looking at CCTV, no sign of significant bird activity along the flight path. So bird strikes impacting both engines, another common cause, seems unlikely to. All these findings really push the investigation away from standard technical issues and point quite strongly towards human actions within the cockpit.
And that leads us back to the criticism of that preliminary report, right? Especially about how vague it was, about what happened right after that. Why did you cut off exchange? It doesn't say who spoke. It doesn't detail any other conversation or actions in those critical seconds. That ambiguity definitely raised some eyebrows. Experts like Bjorn Firm at Liam News, he's been quite vocal. He suggested this inadequate information standard combined with that delay in moving the switches back 9 to 12 seconds instead of instantly points to problematic pilot interaction.
That's true.
And even suggested the report might be avoiding the details, potentially concealing an ugly truth. Strong words.
It does raise that very important question about transparency in these initial reports, especially when you're dealing with potentially sensitive human factors. How much do you share and when? You have to balance the public's need to know with the integrity of a potentially ongoing investigation, maybe even one that could lead to criminal inquiries or just very uncomfortable truths about human behavior under pressure. These preliminary reports are meant to be factual timelines based on data, but by omitting that crucial context, what was said next, what were the immediate actions after the denial, it inevitably fuels speculation. And it raises profound questions about what really happened in that cockpit. Why the silence on subsequent dialogue? CVRs usually record everything right up to impact. That information vacuum, as you said, can easily get filled with misinformation.
So, okay, let's delve into the why. What theories are out there to explain this sequence? Starting with the human factor, which often seems more complex than just mechanics. Could it have been somehow a terrible mistake? An inadvertent action under just unimaginable stress? John Cox, he's a well-respected former airline pilot and safety consultant. He's pointed out that pilots, even experienced ones, can make fatal errors under extreme pressure. He mentioned an old case back in the 80s. A Delta pilot accidentally cut fuel to an engine. But crucially, that pilot had altitude, lots of it, time to recover. Flight 171 had none. It's a terrifying thought, isn't it? That even with all the training, some instinctual wrong action, a cognitive slip, could happen at the absolute worst moment.
Well, while human error under pressure is always a possibility in aviation, the specific idea of muscle memory confusion for these switches, it faces really strong counter-arguments from engineers and experienced pilots like Firm. He's emphatic. The fuel cutoff switches are not part of routine flight muscle memory. Pilots simply don't touch them during normal flight, ever. They're used for shutdown at the gate, specific maintenance, or that rare, deliberate engine shutdown in an emergency. And again, those physical safeguards we talked about, the lift guards, the metal stop locks they make, accidentally moving both of them in sequence, highly unlikely, almost non-existent. It's not a flick of a switch, it's a positive physical action twice. That detail keeps pushing us beyond simple inadvertent error. It demands a deeper why.
And because it's so hard to explain as an accident or muscle memory, and you have that ambiguity in the report, that stark denial, I didn't, well, some experts and commentators, they've been forced to consider, by elimination really, that extremely rare, devastating possibility. An intentional act by one of the crew members. It's speculation, obviously, but it comes from that analytical gap. When you rule out the common causes, investigators are obligated to look at all possibilities, no matter how disturbing or unthinkable they are. It's not an accusation, but it becomes a necessary line of inquiry when the data points away from everything else.
Exactly. When the technical explanations just don't fit, when the recorded human actions seem to defy logic, training, standard procedures, investigators have to go there. They have to examine all possibilities, however unsettling. It's a grim reality of accident investigation, but it's essential for completeness. This means looking into crew backgrounds, recent stresses, everything. It's unfortunately happened in other extremely rare global incidents. It shows how rigorous the process is, no stone left unturned, even the ones that are incredibly difficult to look under.
But there's a completely different theory out there too, isn't there? One that points away from the pilots entirely. U.S. Aviation attorney Mary Sciotto, she was the Inspector General for the Unit Department of Transportation, she's proposed something else. She suggests it could be a known Boeing 787 software fault. She points to the Thrust Control Malfunction Accommodation TCMA and the FADEC systems. Her idea is that these systems might have wrongly sensed the plane was still on the ground, even after liftoff. And if they thought it hadn't taken off, they might automatically throttle back or even shut down the engines without pilot input.
Yes, Sciavo backs this up by citing a couple of previous incidents. A 2025 United 787 that reportedly had a nosedive suspected computer fault, and a 2019 ANA flight where she claims the TCMA system failed, causing a similar engine rollback. She argues the raw data from Flight 171's recorders will eventually prove her software theory right. Essentially that the plane's own computers got confused at the worst possible moment.
Okay, but that theory, it seems to have a lot of pushback from other experts.
It does, yes. A pretty broad consensus of aviation engineers and other experts have dismissed Sciavo's theory, some calling it, lacking factual basis. They stress that the 787 system for knowing if it's on the ground or in the air, the weight on wheels or WOW function is extremely robust, highly redundant. It doesn't just rely on one sensor like a radar altimeter. It uses multiple inputs, wheel rotation sensors, sensors measuring landing gear strut compression, stow sensors, all working together. For the system to mistakenly think it's still on the ground after liftoff would require multiple independent systems failing simultaneously, which is engineered to be incredibly improbable. They also point out that the ANA incident in 2019, the one Sciavo often cites, was thoroughly investigated. The conclusion wasn't a TCMA failure causing shutdown, but a mix of factors. An uneven landing, deploying thrust reversers too early, creating weird conditions that were then mismanaged. Not a systemic software bug-cutting fuel.
Okay, so the technical counter-argument is pretty strong then.
It is, and this gets to a crucial point when we're evaluating conflicting expert opinions, especially with complex tech. You have to understand the design principles. Modern aircraft software, especially for engine control, is highly isolated. FADSE controls each engine independently. The system is specifically designed not to allow a single computer command to shut down both engines unless the crew physically tells it to, for safety reasons. And the preliminary report clearly states the physical fuel control switches in the cockpit were moved to cutoff. It wasn't the FADC system itself closing fuel valves because of a bad weight on wheels signal. That physical switch movement really brings the focus back to the cockpit, not an underlying software malfunction initiating the whole thing. Understanding these design principles helps sort through the theories.
Putting the pieces back together after something like this is a huge international effort, isn't it? Not just one agency. India's AIB is leading, obviously, since it happened there, but they're getting major help from all over. The UK's Air Accidents Investigation Branch sent a team because a flight was headed to London. The US National Transportation Safety Board, the NTSB, they're world-renowned for this stuff. They sent a specialist GOAT team. The US FAA is involved too. And of course, representatives from Boeing, who made the plane, and GE Aerospace, who made the engines. They provide crucial technical data. It really is like a global detective agency, isn't it? Every tiny piece of data examined to rebuild those final seconds.
Absolutely. And central to all of that are the black boxes, although, as you probably know, they're actually bright orange, to make them easier to find in wreckage. In this case, 2 enhanced recorders, combining both flight data, FDR, and cockpit voice, CVR. The first one was found remarkably quickly, within 28 hours, actually on a rooftop near the crash site. Amazing, really. The second was located a few days later, June 16th, amongst all the debris. And the data from both was successfully downloaded by June 25th. That's huge. It means investigators have this incredibly detailed record, hundreds of parameters, airspeed, altitude, engine data, control inputs, plus every sound, every word spoken in the cockpit. They also found a digital video recorder with footage from external and cabin cameras. All that data together is just vital for piecing together exactly what happened and why.
But even with all that effort, the investigation, especially right at the start, faced quite a bit of criticism about transparency, didn't it? India's Ministry of Civil Aviation, the AAIB, they got flack from media and experts for what was seen as inconsistent communication, being slow, not releasing verified facts quickly enough. And that created this information vacuum, which, yeah, you can imagine, just got filled with speculation, rumors, misinformation online.
Yes, and that highlights that really difficult balancing act for investigators. How fast do you release information versus ensuring it's absolutely accurate and verified? Public interest is intense after a tragedy like this. People demand answers. But releasing unverified details prematurely can cause huge problems, erode trust, spread misinformation, maybe even hinder the investigation itself. It's a tough line to walk. You want to be transparent, but you absolutely have to maintain the integrity of the forensic process. Managing expectations while doing meticulous work is a real challenge.
So while the investigation was getting underway, there were immediate actions taken too, right, by the regulators and the airline. India's DGCA, the main regulatory body, they ordered extra pre-departure checks on Air India's whole 787 fleet. But interestingly, those extra checks, they did not yield any clues to the investigation, which again kind of points away from a fleet-wide mechanical issue. The DGCA also ordered specific maintenance checks on things like fuel monitoring systems, engine controls, oil systems for all the 787s, just being extra cautious, covering all bases while the main investigation focused elsewhere.
And internally, Air India's parent, the Tata Group, they made public statements, offered condolences, committed support to the victims' families, announced that compensation figure, $10 million, about $120,000 per passenger, extending it to ground victims too. They also pledged to help rebuild the medical college building that was destroyed, important gestures. Though there was also that controversy around the Air India CEO, Campbell Wilson, allegedly plagiarizing parts of an old statement from another airline CEO after a crash, caused a bit of a stir. And on a more somber internal note, Tata Group suspended some Air India SATS officers for apparently partying soon after the crash. Shows how sensitive things are, the deep impact.
And one of the more unusual steps, but it really shows how seriously the industry takes learning from these things. Air India pilots actually recreated the Flight 171 takeoff in-flight simulators, trying different scenarios, right? Not just the engine failure, but maybe electrical problems, landing gear stuck down, flaps retracted, testing all sorts of things. And what they found in those simulations was really critical. None of those other conditions on their own caused the simulator to crash like Flight 171 did, which just focused attention even more squarely on that fuel switch action. It ruled out a lot of other plausible but ultimately incorrect ideas. It shows the lengths they go to recreating it to really understand.
Absolutely. And if you connect that to the bigger picture, that kind of intense simulation, that deep analysis, that's exactly how aviation safety gets better over time. You often hear that phrase, that aviation regulations are written in blood. It means lessons are learned, hard lessons from accidents. This process of learning, adapting, even from tragedies as devastating and puzzling as this one, is what relentlessly drives safety improvements. It's how the safest form of transport keeps trying to get even safer, tackling new challenges, even the really difficult ones involving human factors.
Amidst all this darkness, though, there was that one incredible story of survival. Just unbelievable. Vishwas Kumar Ramesh, a 40-year-old British citizen, sole survivor. Out of 242 people on board, he was in seat 11A, right next to an emergency exit. His escape just defies the odds. Apparently, the section of the plane he was in broke away somehow and ended up on the ground floor of the hostel. The impact broke the emergency exit open, and he managed to get out. There's even video of him, disoriented but walking away from the wreckage before paramedics got to him. Just wow.
It's fascinating, isn't it? How survival in these high-impact crashes can sometimes come down to sheer luck, microseconds, the random physics of the impact. He had minor burns, was disoriented, but incredibly was out of the hospital in 5 days. Astonishing. His account is just heartbreaking, though, remembering seeing people die, feeling the plane kind of stuck in the air, lights flickering before the crash, and tragically his brother, who was sitting elsewhere on the plane, didn't make it. It just highlights that cruel randomness of survival in these events, the incredible forces involved.
And the broader human cost. It's just immense. It goes so far beyond the plane itself. Everyone on board except Mr. Ramesh perished. 241 people, plus 19 people on the ground, including, tragically, the former Chief Minister of Gujarat, Vijay Rupani. They needed DNA to identify him because the heat was so intense, estimated at 1,500 degrees Celsius. Just horrific. And at least 50 medical students from the hostel were hospitalized too, caught in the fire and the collapse. The ripple effect, it just devastates families, communities, traumatizes rescuers, touches so many lives.
It really does. The aftermath extends far beyond the technical side of the investigation. It's a testament to human solidarity, too, seeing the response. Over 300 firefighters, 60 fire trucks, ambulances, teams from the Army, Border Security Force, National Disaster Response Force, all converging on that chaotic scene, working tirelessly. And the response from Tata Group, beyond the compensation, planning to help rebuild the college, that's a tangible step towards helping the community heal from such a massive blow.
And Air India, they did that symbolic thing too, retiring the flight number.
Yes, they retired AI-171 and the return flight AI-172, replaced them with AI-159 and AI-160. Their subsidiary, Air India Express, also retired IX-171. It's common practice after major accidents, a quiet way to honor the victims, avoid constantly reminding people of the tragedy associated with that number, and allow the route to continue under a new designation. A mark of respect, really.
Yeah, it is. It feels like a small but necessary gesture in the face of something so huge.
It's part of how an industry that deals with immense technological complexity still acknowledges the profound human element, the human cost, when things go wrong. It's about respect, remembrance, and that commitment to learning and moving forward.
So where does this leave us as we wrap up this deep dive? The core mystery of Air India Flight 171, it's still just deeply unsettling, isn't it? You have this modern jet, apparently fit to fly, experienced crew, and moments after takeoff, both engines lose power because the fuel switches are moved to queued off, followed by that denial in the cockpit. The preliminary report, as we've gone through, it's rolled out the usual suspects: mechanical failure, bad fuel, wrong flap settings. It points firmly towards human action, whether that was some terrible mistake or something else. The how seems clearer from the data the switches moved, but the why, that just hangs there, elusive.
Yeah.
Right. And that preliminary report, it gave us facts, it gave us a timeline, but it deliberately and correctly at this stage avoided conclusions about the ultimate cause. Getting the full context of those cockpit interactions, the definitive answers about why those switches move, the circumstances behind it, that all has to wait for the final comprehensive report. And that could easily take another year or even longer. The investigation continues, digging into pilot training, background, any subtle design factors, that incredibly complex interaction between people and technology under extreme stress. Critical thinking is still absolutely essential as the full picture slowly emerges from all the forensic work.
So in a world that constantly strives for more safety, through technology, through automation, this deep dive into Air India 171, it really leaves us with a heavy question, doesn't it? Something to think about. When something happens that defies all the odds, that goes against all the procedures and safeguards, when the truly improbable becomes reality, how do we keep learning? How do we adapt? How do we build trust in systems where, ultimately, the final fail-safe might still be that unpredictable human element?
If you found this story insightful and want more calm, in-depth explorations of the world's most important events, subscribe to RealTime Affairs. Don't forget to like, share, and leave your thoughts. Your support helps us bring you stories that matter even when the world goes quiet.